This countdown presented the 8 most catastrophic skydiving deaths ever recorded, ranked by the sheer horror of how quickly expertise and preparation were erased at terminal velocity. They ranged from innocent first-timers who were undone by hidden equipment flaws to seasoned veterans whose overconfidence turned a calculated risk into an irreversible disaster. Even the smallest error, an unknown condition, or an arrogant decision could mean there were no second chances. Which fatal jump earned the #1 spot? And what lessons did each leave behind for the skydiving world? The countdown began with number 8. March 14th, 2022. Emily Carter, age 22, stood at the edge of the open door at Blue Ridge Skydiving Center in Virginia. She had just completed her accelerated freefall certification, logging 7 instructor-assisted jumps and passing every emergency procedure drill with precision. Family and friends had driven in from 3 states to watch her first solo. The sky was clear, winds steady at 8 knots. Emily's student rig had passed inspection that morning, with her main canopy packed by a licensed rigger and the reserve sealed within the FAA 180-day repack window. At 3,400 feet above ground, Emily pitched her pilot chute on schedule. Witnesses on the ground saw the deployment bag trailing behind her, but the canopy inside failed to emerge. Line twists locked the bag tight, creating a classic bag lock malfunction. For 4.8 seconds, there was no inflation, no drag, no deceleration, just the steady fall of a body at terminal velocity. Emily reached for her reserve handle at roughly 1,600 feet, but the remaining altitude offered no margin. The reserve pilot chute launched, but the main was still trapped in the bag, lines entangled. She impacted the ground at an estimated 122 miles per hour. Emergency crews reached her within 2 minutes. The medical examiner cited massive blunt force trauma, multiple spinal fractures, and internal hemorrhage. Death was pronounced at the scene. The investigation traced the malfunction to a manufacturing defect in the deployment system's adhesive, affecting a limited batch of student rigs. A service bulletin ordered immediate inspection of all similar equipment. The incident prompted a review of student rig quality assurance and reinforced the reality that, for novice jumpers, even flawless training could not overcome a hidden mechanical flaw. April 9th, 2019. Mark Jensen, age 46, had logged more than 8,000 jumps, and he was known for his calm presence and precise instruction. On that morning, he was paired with a first-time Tandem passenger, a 32-year-old tourist named Sarah Patel. She wore a bright blue jumpsuit, and she smiled nervously as Mark checked each connector on her harness with practiced hands. The drop zone was busy. Skies were clear, and the wind was 6 knots. Mark's rig had passed its biannual inspection. Sarah's harness was freshly adjusted, and it was double-checked by ground staff and by Mark himself before boarding the aircraft. At altitude, the pair moved to the door. Mark attached Sarah's harness to his using the standard 4-point system, including the main lateral connectors. The aircraft leveled off at 13,000 feet. They exited in stable position. Mark deployed the drogue at 10,500 feet to slow their descent. For the next 30 seconds, everything followed protocol. But at 6,000 feet, during the transition to main parachute deployment, a critical connector misrouting in the lateral harness assembly failed under load. Witnesses on the ground saw Sarah separate from Mark, drifting laterally 18 meters in just 6 seconds. Both entered freefall at approximately 135 miles per hour. Mark attempted to reach Sarah, tucking his arms and diving, but the separation was too great. Neither had time to deploy a reserve. Rescue teams arrived within 4 minutes. The medical examiner later documented multiple traumatic injuries, including atlanto-occipital dislocation and bilateral femur fractures. Both individuals were pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation identified a vulnerability in the tandem harness load path. If the lateral connector was misrouted, it could appear secure during pre-jump checks, yet fail catastrophically under freefall stress. Manufacturer analysis led to a service bulletin mandating inspection and retrofit of all similar tandem harnesses within 90 days, affecting more than 2,400 rigs worldwide. Industry-wide, tandem harness training and inspection protocols were rewritten. For professionals and novices alike, the event demonstrated that even the most experienced oversight could not always compensate for a hidden equipment flaw. June 22, 2017. Daniel Kim, age 35, boarded the King Air at Skydive Mountain West for a high-altitude jump. With 500 logged jumps and a spotless safety record, Daniel was considered a model of discipline and preparation. Friends described him as methodical, rarely skipping a checklist, always double-checking his gear. That morning, he reviewed his oxygen system, checked his altimeter, and confirmed his automatic activation device was armed. The load climbed to 18,000 feet. Supplemental oxygen flowed through the pre-breathing mask as the green light signaled jump run. Daniel exited at 18,000 feet, arms tucked, tracking away from the group. At that altitude, the air thinned to less than half its density at sea level. Hypoxia risk was real, but Daniel's training and equipment were current. His audible altimeter chimed at 15,000 feet, then at 10,000 feet. At approximately 17,200 feet, Daniel's body arched, then slackened. In helmet footage later reviewed by investigators, his legs and arms lost all tension. He tumbled, spinning slowly, with no sign of corrective movement. 90 seconds after exit, his automatic activation device sensed the descent rate and altitude and fired the reserve. The canopy deployed cleanly, but Daniel remained limp beneath the lines. The wind carried him 1.8 kilometers off the drop zone, where he landed in a field still attached to his gear. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. Initial examination found no external trauma. Cardiac monitoring showed asystole. The medical examiner later documented acute coronary thrombosis, a blockage of the left anterior descending artery, resulting in sudden cardiac arrest at altitude. Death was pronounced at the scene. The reserve had functioned as designed, but no intervention was possible. The incident prompted renewed debate about medical screening for skydivers, especially for high-altitude and oxygen-assisted jumps. Several drop zones began requiring detailed health questionnaires and physician sign-off for advanced jump profiles. USPA issued updated guidance, urging jumpers to disclose cardiac history and consult doctors before high-altitude attempts. Daniel's death underscored the reality that even perfect training and equipment could not compensate for a hidden physiological vulnerability. September 3, 2015. 4 Red Valley skydiving team members boarded a twin otter at sunrise. Each had over 1,200 jumps and a year of training together. Their plan was to build a diamond formation by 12,000 feet, then break off cleanly at 7,500 feet. The team had drilled exits, approaches, and separation signals. Conditions were stable, scattered clouds at 9,000 feet, and 4-knot winds. All parachute rigs passed inspection. Containers were packed and pin-checked by a senior rigger. Audible altimeters were set to 8,000 feet and 5,000 feet. After exit, the jumpers spread out, matching speed and heading. By 12,300 feet, grips locked and the diamond held. At 8,000 feet, the leader signaled break off. 3 jumpers tracked away as planned. The 4th, slightly low and right, tried to correct at the last moment. At 7,500 feet, 2 collided at a relative speed of 118 miles per hour. The impact sheared the right shoulder of one jumper's container, tearing the closing flap and exposing main canopy lines. The rig spun, lines twisting, container fabric flapping. The jumper tried to deploy, but the internal structure had failed, and the deployment bag remained trapped. Attempts to reach the reserve were blocked by the twisted harness and spinning descent. Altitude vanished in seconds. The others deployed and spiraled away. Ground staff watched as the jumper struck open ground with no canopy above. Medical responders recorded multiple fractures, traumatic brain injury, and internal hemorrhage. Forensic inspection confirmed catastrophic container failure at the shoulder junction triggered by the collision. USPA investigators traced the structural failure to the impact, prompting a review of break-off procedures. Recommendations soon raised minimum break-off altitudes for groups larger than 4, stressing vertical separation and collision avoidance. Even among skilled teams, one miscalculation at speed could erase every safety margin. July 12, 2021. Lucas Meyer, age 29, zipped into his custom-fitted wingsuit at the edge of the Lauterbrunnen Ridge in Switzerland. With over 200 proximity flights logged, Lucas was known in the community for his methodical approach. Every jump was planned with glide ratio calculations, wind readings, and GPS-mapped exit points. His planned route that morning called for a 2.9-to-1 glide ratio, aiming for a predicted clearance of 170 feet above the tree line. Weather reports showed steady westerly winds at 8 knots, but the valley microclimate was notorious for unpredictable rotor effects near the ridgeline. His altimeter and audible warning devices were set, and he reviewed his flight path twice with a ground spotter before committing to the exit. As he launched from the cliff at 8:07 a.m., Lucas maintained a tight body position, accelerating to over 140 miles per hour. For the first 30 seconds, the flight tracked as planned. At the halfway mark, a sudden rotor, an invisible swirling downdraft, reduced his lift. GPS data later reconstructed his trajectory. Instead of the expected 170 feet, his actual clearance dropped to just 20 feet above the rocks. Witnesses described a subtle but irreversible dip as Lucas passed the last ridge marker. At that speed, even a 1-degree miscalculation left no time for recovery. The wingsuit margin for error had vanished. Impact occurred at 8:08 a.m. The medical examiner documented blunt force trauma to the chest and pelvis, multiple rib fractures, aortic rupture, and immediate loss of consciousness. Death was pronounced at the scene by emergency responders within 4 minutes. The investigation cited terrain-induced wind shear as a contributing factor, with Lucas's flight path offering no buffer for environmental variation. In response, the Swiss Parachute Association issued an advisory urging the use of GPS-based audible altitude alarms for all wingsuit proximity flights and recommended a minimum clearance buffer of 100 feet in variable wind conditions. 11 national skydiving associations circulated the guidance, sparking debate over whether electronic warning devices should become mandatory. For wingsuit pilots, the lesson was clear. Even the most careful preparation could be undone by a single invisible shift in the air. August 18, 2020. 31-year-old Tyler Mason scaled the locked stairwell of a downtown office tower in Minneapolis. Security guards, alerted by motion sensors, began their ascent just as Tyler slipped onto the rooftop. He had 30 seconds to assess the wind, check his rig, and reach the ledge. The building stood at 220 feet, barely above the minimum for a base jump. Tyler's gear was a lightweight single parachute rig designed for rapid deployment, favored by urban jumpers for its speed but unforgiving of error. City ordinances and posted warnings made the legal risk clear: trespass fines up to $25,000 and the threat of criminal charges. Tyler's social media accounts showed a pattern of high-risk stunts, each one pushing closer to the edge for online attention. The rooftop exit was rushed. Security reached the door as Tyler clipped his chest strap and ran for the parapet. He launched into the darkness with less than 10 seconds to spare. wind swirling unpredictably between the towers. The canopy deployed at 180 feet, but a crosswind caught the inflated wing, drifting him 45 feet laterally. Instead of clearing the street, Tyler's parachute slammed him into the glass facade of the adjacent building. Witnesses on the ground heard the impact, then watched as the canopy collapsed, sending him tumbling to the sidewalk below. Estimated descent speed at impact was over 60 miles per hour. Paramedics arrived within 3 minutes. The medical examiner documented multiple compound fractures, severe cranial trauma, and pulmonary lacerations. Death was pronounced at the scene. The subsequent investigation found no equipment malfunction. Security camera footage confirmed the exit was made under active pursuit, with no time for wind checks or proper site evaluation. Investigation findings were corroborated by witness testimony and video evidence. City officials responded by mandating electronic roof alarms on all buildings over 15 stories and raising trespass penalties to the legal maximum. The incident reignited debate about base jumping's place in urban environments, with law enforcement and building owners calling for even harsher deterrence. For the skydiving and base communities, the message was unambiguous. In urban airspace, legal and physical margins were measured in seconds, and one miscalculation could erase every escape route. May 21, 2023. Dylan Reyes, age 26, boarded the Cessna Caravan at Sunfield Skydive with his phone secured to his wrist, intent on capturing a viral freefall. He had 150 jumps, enough for solo exits, but short of the 300 jumps required for camera use at this drop zone. Earlier that morning, instructors warned him twice that handheld devices were off-limits for less experienced jumpers. Dylan dismissed those warnings, confident he could manage both the jump and the recording. His name was marked with a red asterisk on the manifest, but the loadmaster, preoccupied, allowed him to board. At 10,500 feet, Dylan gripped the phone, thumb poised on record. He exited with his left arm extended, camera aimed at his face, and his right hand on the pilot chute. The focus on the shot produced an immediate distraction. His body arched unevenly, and he entered an uncontrolled spin. The rotation accelerated past 3 revolutions per second. The altimeter, captured in the footage, passed through 3,000 feet as he fought to stabilize. At 2,100 feet, still inverted and spinning, he reached for the deployment handle. The main canopy deployed, but the risers failed to clear. Lines had become tangled around the phone and his forearm, locking the risers and preventing full inflation. At a descent rate in excess of 160 feet per second, he had approximately 14 seconds before impact. Ground staff activated emergency response as Dylan struck the north field boundary. Paramedics arrived within 2 minutes. The medical examiner documented multiple cervical fractures, severe traumatic brain injury, and bilateral pulmonary contusions. Death was pronounced at the scene. The phone remained attached and recorded a final blurred sequence showing a spinning altimeter and an unstable horizon. The subsequent investigation concluded that device-induced distraction impaired Dylan Reyes's altitude awareness and delayed his response. Forensic examination traced the entanglement to the phone lanyard and to the position of the device on his wrist. The drop zone suspended handheld device use for all jumpers below 300 jumps the next morning. Industry discussion focused on visual tunneling, the hazards of operating recording devices in freefall, and the role of attention-seeking in risk-taking. The case became part of a broader regulatory and training conversation. Rules were tightened at multiple drop zones, and manufacturers and operators reviewed harness and lanyard configurations. The fatal sequence underscored a single point. In freefall, loss of situational awareness for a single moment could cascade into an irreversible series of failures. October 16, 2023. David Harlan, 42, stood at Windcrest Drop Zone in Central Texas, reviewing the manifest. With over 12,000 jumps and a reputation for pushing limits, he was known for dismissing weather holds and trusting his own judgment. That day, a cold front brought surface winds of 24 miles per hour, gusting up to 38 miles per hour. The Safety and Training Advisor posted a clear advisory. All student and B license loads were grounded, and experienced jumpers were warned of unpredictable gusts. Most instructors packed up, citing insurance limits and drop zone rules capping operations at 30 miles per hour gusts. David signed his own waiver, determined to make one last jump. At 4:27 in the afternoon, he exited at 4,500 feet under a canopy of 96 square feet built for speed and agility. As his parachute opened, a gust front of 20 miles per hour swept the landing area. The canopy, designed for rapid response, surged downrange almost immediately. Instead of following the planned descent, it was carried 800 feet off course toward the perimeter fence. David fought to steer back, pulling hard on the rear risers, but the canopy bucked and twisted in the turbulent air. At 900 feet, a final gust lifted the wing, then dropped it sharply, sending the canopy into a steep, uncontrollable dive. The wind drove him directly into a set of 13,000-volt power lines bordering the field. Contact triggered an arc flash, burning through the right riser and igniting the harness. Impact with the ground followed in less than a second. Emergency crews arrived within 4 minutes. The medical examiner cited combined blunt force trauma and electrical burns as the cause of death, listing cervical spine fractures, cardiac arrhythmia from electrical current, and full-thickness burns to the chest and right arm. Death was pronounced at 4:33 in the afternoon. The harness and canopy showed no mechanical failure. Only wind shear dynamics and the decision to jump in conditions exceeding safety thresholds contributed. The investigation, led by the safety and training advisor and insurance underwriters, reconstructed the wind profile using anemometer logs and radar data. Gusts ranged from 18 to 38 miles per hour in the 5 minutes before exit, with a measured gust spread of 20 miles per hour. The canopy's downrange drift was calculated at over 800 feet, far outside the planned landing pattern. Insurers issued new policy language. Safety and training advisor sign-off was now required for all loads when gusts exceeded 30 miles per hour. No solo or instructor jumps proceeded above that limit, regardless of experience. USPA distributed a technical bulletin stating canopy aerodynamics were governed by physics, not pilot skill. Drop zone rules now granted the safety and training advisor absolute authority to suspend operations. David Harlan's death became the case study for annual safety briefings, a final unambiguous lesson: experience does not override physics, and deliberate boundary pushing carries consequences no skill can reverse. Across all 8 cases, one pattern stood out. In skydiving, tiny lapses, whether mechanical, medical, or mental, erased every layer of preparation. Experience could not outmaneuver unpredictability. Even the best made fatal choices or faced unforeseeable events. Skydiving's real risk was not the fall, it was the illusion of control. And that was what made every jump a final test. Drop your thoughts below and subscribe for more shocking stories.